Ben Carroll produces. Maggie Sutton's on the TV side producing. Kevin Cunningham, Aaron Gurnis will getting the scores throughout the night on this 2010 Iowa High School Playoff Edition first round. I'm Tony Atseni in for the ill Mike Rickard tonight as we continue on with Friday Night Live, the Playoff Edition. And it's going to be a fun night. And as always, our Shields game crew is out and about. Shields will sponsor tonight's game with Larry Cotler and Geoff Conn. They're at Des Moines Lincoln facing West Des Moines Valley out at Tiger Stadium. And from what I hear, if the weather changes, the guys are high atop the tower at West Des Moines Valley. Larry, Geoff, how are you tonight?
We're good, and you're exactly right. We are upstairs. Tonight we'll be in the press box,
Yep.
and Rickard can't even give us a hard time about it because he's not there.
Well, hope you feel better, Mike.
Yeah, we do hope you feel better. But we're here tonight. It's Valley Stadium. It's the Valley Tigers taking on the Des Moines Lincoln Rail Splitters. I'd love to tell you that the crowd is flocking in, but it's not. And I don't think the fact that it's just church night because it's Wednesday really has a lot to do with that. I would think the weather probably has something to do with that. It's I don't know, breezy's not the right word.
Well,
windy.
It's cold.
This is windy and cold tonight.
I mean,
Geoff.
it's the coldest it's been all year, but it's kind of a shame the weather did this because looking at the 4A brackets on the western side of the state, Larry, I looked at two games that really piqued my interest as far as matchups went. This was one of them.
Mm-hmm.
The other one was the Southeast Polk Johnston game. Of course, those teams played last week, but I think this should be a pretty interesting game. We have a Lincoln team who leads Class 4A in all of rushing touchdowns with 48 at 6-3. In the Metro Conference and Valley out of the Iowa Conference, also 6-3 this year. Kind of still trying to get back to the top of the 4A bracket. But to me, this is an interesting matchup between these two teams tonight.
Well, it is, and you've got one team which features offense. That would be Des Moines Lincoln, and as Tom Mihalovich will tell us a little bit later on this half hour in the pregame interview I did with him earlier in the week, they don't stop a lot of people. That's been their problem this year. They've given up a lot of points, but then again, on the other side, they've scored a lot of points. Valley, meanwhile, gives up about 11 points a game. So you've got the classic offense, and they'll run the football all night long. So this weather is not going to affect Lincoln very much because they don't throw the ball that much anyway. But for that matter, neither does Valley. Valley likes to run the football, too. We saw Martin Looney have a big game last time we saw him against Waukee. You've got Trey Lewis. They'll run the football. So the weather shouldn't be that much of a factor in terms of the air games for either one of these teams.
Well, you talk about running. Lincoln has their running game, too, with three backs who've rushed for more than 700 yards this year, led by Kevon Bernstein, over 1,150. And checking out the flags out of the north side of the Valley Stadium, all three of them are pretty stiff between the state flag, the American flag, and the High School Athletic Association flag. So it looks like right now the wind is blowing to the south. Pretty stiff, kind of swirling. So there's no question it's going to be really difficult to throw anywhere on the field in high school football tonight.
Well, let's take a look at what else is happening around the CIML. And the same thing is going to happen in a lot of these other games. You've got Dowling Catholic, the number one team in Class 4A. They're taking on Marshalltown tonight. Dowling comes in with a record of 9-0, and Marshalltown at 3-6. You might remember last year they had a classic semifinal matchup won by Marshalltown. Probably won't turn out that way tonight. Dowling Catholic has been rolling over most everybody this year, and the Bobcats have lost 6 in a row. You look at this Dowling football team, they forced 21 turnovers this year. They probably will have too much for Marshalltown tonight, one would suspect.
No, you wouldn't think so. Over at Williams Stadium at East High tonight, those two teams hooking up. And, yeah, you'd figure Dowling is a warm-up matchup for Dowling and a possible matchup with their rival here with Valley on Monday night for a Sweet 16 matchup there. In the other games, Larry, you have Sioux City East hosting Indianola tonight, and the Indians feature quarterback Cale Render along with Brennan Davey at the running back position. So you've Indianola 4-5 at Sioux City East 7-2. East High of Sioux City, a solid team in the Missouri River Conference this year, loser of a couple of games. And Sioux City East has been a team that's played well on that side of the extreme northwest part of the state.
Right. Well, last week they had a 72-6 win. That's impressive. Their quarterback, Alex Emming, had come back from injury, and he completed 9 passes, and 5 of them went for touchdowns. So that's extremely impressive. Indianola's kind of been up and down all year long, and this will be a tough one for them to conquer. I'll tell you, one of the games we're really looking forward to tonight is a rematch of last week's Johnston Southeast Polk game, which is again being played at Southeast Polk. I believe that's where they played last weekend, right?
I think so.
Yeah, and that was 20-17. Johnston won that game. Nathan DePenning, terrific running back. And about the only time we saw him shut down this year was, I think it was against Dowling Catholic. But He ran for 193 yards and 2 touchdowns last week. However, the one thing that Johnston has to be careful of, they've given up 83 points in the last 2 games. So defensively, they're a little suspect. And on the other side, it's been a real good year for Southeast Polk. They bounced back from last year's 1-8 season, which pretty much a fluke under Denny Muller.
Yeah, I was really impressed with Southeast Polk this year. We saw him twice with the Shields game night crew against Roosevelt early on, and then with Waukee in weeks 1 and 2, I believe, back-to-back. Really impressed with their team. Kyle Starcevich, nice-looking quarterback for them. And Brock Daniels, I believe both games we had with Southeast Polk, Brock Daniels returned punts for touchdowns. So Brock Daniels is obviously a threat in the special teams for the Rams team. And you mentioned the game last week, Johnston winning 20-17, a rematch tonight. I think it really shows the overall balance of the CIML this year, because we all look at Dowling, and Dowling is pretty much head and tails above everybody in the league. But you ask, who's number 2? And Southeast Polk is definitely up there for that number 2 position. But I think the way Johnston played last week, knocked them off, shows that after Dowling, you kind of wonder, who can beat who in this conference this year.
Right, and we were figuring that if Valley were to beat Lincoln here tonight, they probably would get Dowling, assuming Dowling beats Marshalltown in the next round. Another game of interest tonight, Ottumwa at Ankeny. Now, one would normally classify Ankeny as the favorite, but here's a stat to think of. Ankeny has been outscored 97-65 in the past 3 weeks. Ottumwa, meanwhile, is averaging 35 points per game over the last 5 games. So that one might look like a potential upset. If you're talking about potential upsets here, that could be one. Ottumwa coming in with an outstanding quarterback in Ben Kramer.
Yeah, Ottumwa winner of the Metro Conference 5-4, Ankeny 6-3. I believe these 2 teams played in the regular season, if I'm not mistaken. But Ankeny, they've had a pretty solid year, but maybe not quite the year that you normally see out of a.
They had a lot of injuries this year. That's one thing
true.
About Ankeny.
Yep. Due to the injury factor, they didn't have quite the year you normally see a Jerry Pizzetti coached team have. Normally 7-8 wins a year. They were maybe down 1 or 2 victories, but obviously Ankeny fell to Indianola earlier in the year, and that was kind of a shock up in Ankeny way. But this is an interesting game too. I agree, Larry. But you kind of have to give the edge to Ankeny, I think, in this game playing at home.
But I'm saying, wouldn't be shocked if someone came through the victory here.
No, not at all.
Not be stunned at all. Waukee is at Fort Dodge tonight. The Dodgers have only 1 loss. We saw that loss. That was right here against Dowling Catholic earlier. And really, Fort Dodge did not play a good game that night. But they've come back and they've beaten Valley, like they beat them last week.
They won the Iowa Conference.
Right, they're 8-1. Right. And Waukee has been struggling up and down. We've seen Waukee a couple times too, and they're rebuilding this year. They've got a terrific player in Johnny Getting. Evan Brewer has rushed for 6 touchdowns. Fort Dodge, though, Levi Peters with a couple of touchdown passes last week. And these 2 teams met back on October 8th, and the Dodgers won at 21-7. Once again, you'd have to give a decided edge to Fort Dodge in this one, especially playing at home.
Yeah, definitely with Fort Dodge. And Waukee is down a little bit this year. I know Scott Carlson is, as you mentioned, kind of rebuilding that program right now in the rebuilding process. A team that usually wins maybe 5, 6 games a year, and down to the 3-win mark. But I guess you got to give credit to Fort Dodge, who's only won 2 playoff games in their school history, which kind of says a lot about where that team is this year and how far they've come and to win the Iowa Conference and get to the 8-win mark this year.
All right, a couple of other games. Your alma mater East goes to Ames. Hopefully a better showing this time than last.
Yeah.
45-2, the little Cyclones thumped the Scarlet a little bit earlier this year.
I guess my hope as an alum is that maybe East can score a touchdown tonight against the.
Come on, Geoff, have higher. a little higher aspirations than a touchdown.
I'm saying at least score a touchdown.
Well,
for my
that
alma
would be
mater
good.
tonight.
Yeah, they won't win if they don't score a touchdown.
That's going to be a tough one too for my alma mater East. Ames has had a really good year as well. You mentioned the 45-2 score, and the little Cyclones have a nice looking team there this year too.
They really do. Well, they knocked off Valley this year.
Right.
And that's one game. If you talk to Gary Swenson, that's the one I think that stunned Valley the most when they lost to Ames back on October 1st, 24-3. And then the other game to talk about, you've got one of the top teams in the state, and Abe Lincoln out of Council Bluffs against Urbandale, 3-6. Best thing you can say for Urbandale in this one is that they're going to the playoffs for the first time in back-to-back years since 1998 and 1999. And again, you would think that the Lynx are the heavy favorite in this one. They've got Austin Ebertowski, who's rushed for 1,948 yards and 36 touchdowns, and they've won all their games by double digits. So, again, one would see Council Bluffs Abe Lincoln at a decided favorite in this one. But again, I give props to Urbandale because, with every year you make the playoffs, you get more playing time and more players get a taste of it. And that'll only bode well down the road.
Right. Well, talking about the Council Bluffs Lincoln team, they're the second seed out west in the western half of the bracket, and I know there's a lot of talk about is there anybody on the western side that has a chance to beat Dowling? And I know there's a few people out there who thinks this Council Bluffs Lincoln team could be that team and knock off Dowling. So if they had happened to get to the semifinal, 1 against 2, the top 2 seeds on the western side of the bracket, that'd be a pretty good matchup, I think, if between Council Bluffs Lincoln and Dowling.
And again, weather's going to be a factor tonight. Probably not as much here, because Valley and Lincoln like to run the football, and most of the schools, like in Ankeny, they're going to run the football too, but they've thrown a little bit more this year as well. So anybody who has a passing quarterback, and that's where we go back to Ben Kramer to Tumwa, a guy like Ben, likes to throw the football, they're going to be affected by this win tonight. If you're a running team, you have a real advantage in these games tonight.
Yeah, but before we throw it to our first break, Larry, let's get a quick rundown of the eastern side of the bracket in 4A. Just give you the games real quick.
Sure.
The top seed for the east side is Bettendorf. Bulldogs will take on Waterloo East. They'll host that game. The 8-9 matchup is Cedar Rapids Washington at Dubuque Hempstead. It's Cedar Rapids Xavier hosting Cedar Rapids Kennedy. Eldridge North Scott at home against Iowa City West. And then the bottom half of the eastern half of the bracket, Cedar Falls will play in the Dome tonight, the late game at 8:45 against Burlington. Davenport Assumption plays host to Muscatine. Linn-Mar of Marion will host Pleasant Valley. And Iowa City High is at home against Davenport Central. So that's the eastern half of the 4A bracket.
Let's take a break. We'll hear from the coaches next. Tom Mihalovich from Lincoln, and Valley's Gary Swinton. We continue with the Shields Game Night crew. We're at Lincoln at Valley tonight here on the Iowa Sports Connections Friday Night Live Playoff Edition.